How do you decide when you need to save up for something before you buy it and when you go into debt so that you can afford something and pay that off over time? For most small purchases, you're going to be paying with cash, debit, or a credit card that you know you can pay off. So maybe you're making a small grocery payment, you're paying, $50 for your grocery bill. You can pay that with a credit card as long as you know I've got enough money in my savings account to be able to pay off my credit card by the time the bill is due. But for bigger purchases, you won't always have enough cash available or a credit limit on your credit card, or it might be a big purchase that even if you could use your credit card, you could not pay it off by the time the credit card was due. So what do you do in those cases? Well, the general rule of thumb is that when it comes to needs, you might have to consider going into debt to cover the costs if you're not saving enough to be able to afford that need. But when it comes to wants, it's almost never a good idea to take out a loan. If it's just something that you want in your life, even if you really want it, going into debt and putting yourself in that kind of financial situation is not a really wise decision. Instead, what you might want to consider is saving up for a period of time, putting that money away in a separate account so that you can afford to pay that want that you have in its entirety. Let's talk about an example here. Victor has $2,500 in his bank accounts, so that would be like savings and checkings combined, and he has no debt. In January of next year, he'll begin a 24-week electrical trades program, which has an estimated cost of $3,800. Is taking out a loan to help cover the costs a good option? Explain. Firstly, this kind of question doesn't really have one right answer. There are good answers and there are not so good answers, and those really lie in the explanation part. You could answer this question yes or no and have a very good answer, but what is going to determine that is the explanation. So I'm going to give you just an example of the answer I would give. So I would say to this problem, is taking out a loan to cover the cost a good option, or to cover at least part of the cost a good option? I would say yes, and let's talk about the reasons. First of all, I think that school is often, not always, but often a need. You might say, well, someone just wants to go to school. They don't need to go to school. But because school opens up a lot of options in life, whether that's finding a new career or it might be a part of going down a path you want to take or a way that you want to live your life, it's such an essential part of putting you on the path that you want to live that in my mind, it's a need. So there's another part of this, which is that completing a program like this, will lead to job opportunities with better pay. Assuming that Victor doesn't have a really high-paying job now, by completing an electrical trades program, he might qualify himself for a whole bunch of jobs that pay him better than he currently makes, especially in a high-demand trade. So even though he's going into debt right now to complete the program, after 24 weeks, he might be able to qualify for a job that's going to be earning him more money than he's making now, and he can use that extra money to pay off his debt quite quickly. So it could be a very good financial decision to actually take debt and go to school. He might also qualify for a student loan with this program, and student loans tend to have low interest rates on the loan, which means that they're easier to pay back than other types of loans. So that's also a benefit here. But there are other options that Victor has, and we could say instead, and one option is that he could work for 1 year, save up to afford the program in full. Because he's already got a good savings. So if he worked for a year and saved up the difference to make it up to $3,800, he could afford the program in full. And then maybe if he saved that plus more, he wouldn't have to go into debt for that 24 weeks of full-time schooling. So that's another option as well. But again, it all comes down in a problem like this to the explanation you give.